When we left you last night, we just reported that the President of the United States was demanding nearly $250 million from the Justice Department in connection with the Russia investigation and the classified documents prosecution. The one over boxes and boxes of documents stored in a ballroom and bathroom there. $230 million in compensation for the American taxpayer to be signed off by one of these two top Justice Department officials, both of them handpicked by the president. Todd Blanche, his defense attorney in the documents case, and Stanley Woodward Jr., who represented his co-defendant. Well, today, reaction from a pair of Republican lawmakers, one whose livelihood still depends on being in the president's good graces, the other who's retiring, and see if you can tell which is which.
How comfortable are you with the president apparently seeking $230 million from the Department of Justice?
I don't know the details about that. I've just read it. I didn't talk with him about that. I know that he believes he's owed that reimbursement.
That's House Speaker Mike Johnson, who still needs the president's approval. And here's North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, who's not running again.
I think it's terrible optics, particularly right now. We're talking about $250 million transferring maybe to the president when we're in a shutdown posture. So it's at very best bad timing, but I think it's horrible optics.
Well, notice that despite the criticism, he's still talking optics, not physics, perception, not whether in fact demanding hundreds of millions of dollars from American taxpayers on the say-so of his own appointees is in any way either right or proper. Even the president himself seems surprised he's allowed to do it.
It's interesting because I'm the one that makes the decision, right? And, that decision would have to go across my desk. And it's awfully strange to make a decision where I'm paying myself.
The president yesterday, he also said this.
All I know is that they would owe me a lot of money, but I'm not looking for money. I'd give it to charity or something. I would give it to charity.
Well, about such promises, and more generally, the president in all things charity, he's certainly got some history. For starters, he once had one of his own, the Trump Foundation, or as New York Attorney General put it in her 2018 civil case against the president, Eric and Don Jr., quote, "The foundation was little more than a checkbook for payments to not-for-profits from Mr. Trump or the Trump Organization. Mr. Trump used charitable assets to pay off the legal obligations of entities he controlled, to promote Trump hotels, to purchase personal items, and to support his presidential election campaign." Now, among the items specified in that court document, the purchase for $10,000 of a portrait of him to hang at his Doral Country Club in Florida. The foundation was later dissolved under the court's supervision. So clearly, having a charity has been legally problematic for him. What about giving to them? Well, here he is campaigning in the 2016 Republican primary at an event he billed as a fundraiser for veterans.
We just cracked $6 million, right? $6 million. And we have outside a list of the organizations and folks that are going to be getting this money. We're going to divide it up, and they're going to get a lot of money. Everybody's going to get a lot of money. Donald Trump, another great builder in New York, now a politician. I can't stand this. A politician? I don't want to be called a politician. All talk, no action. I refuse to be called a politician. Donald Trump gave $1 million, okay?
Well, that $6 million figure later turned out not to be true. Here's the headline. It's from our next guest, New York Times investigative reporter Daniel Farenthold, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on it for the Washington Post. As for the $1 million donation that he touted the night of the fundraiser, he eventually paid it in a fashion and only after 4 months of questions about it from Farenthold and others. As he writes at the time, quote, "When asked Tuesday whether he had given the money this week, only because reporters had been asking about it, Trump responded, 'You know, you're a nasty guy. You're really a nasty guy. I gave out millions of dollars that I had no obligation to do.'" Separately, David Farenthold writes, quote, "In the 15 years prior to the veterans' donation, Trump promised to donate earnings from a wide variety of his money-making enterprises, The Apprentice, Trump Vodka, Trump University, a book, another book." Farenthold writes, "If he had honored all those pledges, Trump's gifts to charity would have topped $8.5 million. But in the 15 years prior to the veterans' gift, public records show that Trump donated about $2.8 million through a foundation set up to give his money away, less than a third of the pledged amount, and nothing since 2009. Then there's this. In 2009, he agreed to rent his Seven Springs estate in Westchester County, New York, to Libya's murderous dictator Muammar al-Gaddafi, who hoped to stay in a tent on the grounds during a meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. The plans fell apart when local people objected. Colonel Gaddafi paid then citizen Trump $150,000, which he told us in 2011 he'd given to charity.
Do you still have the money that Gaddafi paid you?
You're not talking that kind of money. Do I still have it? What does that
I
mean?
mean, what happened to the money? Some celebrities that performed for Gaddafi have given that money away to charity, or you've given it away. I think that's the question on people's minds.
Sure, I give tremendous. In fact, the other night, Comedy Central roasted me. They gave me a tremendous amount of money. It's already gone to charity. So I give money to charity. I give that money to charity. And in fact, I said, when I did it, I'm going to take Gaddafi's money. I'm not going to make it easy on him. And I'm going to give the money to charity. And that's exactly what I did.
According to later reporting in the New York Times, if he did, there's no evidence of it on his tax returns, on which he reported just $22,796 in business and personal cash gifts. So his record on actually giving what he says he gives or is giving is murky at best. He does, however, seem to have a soft spot for people accused of scamming charities. Disgraced former Congressman George Santos, for instance, whose sentence he commuted last Friday and who, among other things, allegedly built a homeless veteran out of thousands of dollars from a GoFundMe for the veteran's dying dog.
I don't want you to ever hurt anybody like you hurt me again, George. And nobody else should ever have to go through that. I almost killed myself when that dog died. That's why I'm here. I don't want him to be able to do this again.
Joining me now is investigative reporter for the New York Times, David Fahrenthold. We mentioned earlier that he'd done extensive reporting over the years on President Trump's charitable giving. So, David, based on your reporting, what patterns have you noticed from President Trump in the past when it comes to his charitable giving, which he has talked about numerous times?
Well, with Trump, there's always been this weird contrast. On one hand, he says, I'm so rich, I've got so much money, I don't need any more. On the other hand, he's always asking for your money. He's always asking for people to buy things or to enroll in Trump University, or in this case, for the government to give him money. And so to try to square that circle, he says, I give the money to charity. And it looks like I'm asking for money that I don't need, but you should know, you should be reassured I'm giving the money to charity. But as you said, when we looked at that and looked at those promises, we could find very little evidence that any of these really large promises to give away the proceeds of The Apprentice or The Art of the Deal, that he ever really met the promises he'd made.
If the president ultimately gets the $230 million, is the Department of Justice required to announce a settlement? Would the American public, whose taxpayer dollars would be funding it, know about it?
No, they're not required to announce it.
Would the president have to or be obligated to disclose it if he donated that money to charity? And would he have to disclose the charity he chooses?
Well, every year the president has to file a personal financial disclosure that reports sources of income. So in theory, he would have to report the income, that the money had come to him at some point. It would be months down the line. He would not have to report, however, that he gave it away or who he gave it away to. He could choose to, but there's no public mechanism that says he has to.
And to your knowledge, I mean, he has said that he's paying for part of this building of the ballroom, as well as some corporate donors. Would there be records of that?
Not public records. Certainly, the entity that's handling the charitable donations for this is a nonprofit here in Washington. It could choose to disclose them. Trump could choose to disclose them. But there's no mechanism to force a charity to publicly disclose its donors. So if he did that, there'd be no way we'd be guaranteed to know.
David Fahrenthold, thanks so much. Appreciate it.